we talk with Max Weber and Austin Wozliak of Carbon Cannabis. They share the origins of the business, misconceptions about cannabis, working with local farmers, how they stand apart from other small batch CBD producers, and what's next for Carbon Cannabis. You can find more conversations on our website, lacrosselocal.com. I'm Amy, and he's Brent, and this is Lacrosse Local.
My name is Austin Wozliak. I was born in Denver, Colorado, moved to La Crosse, Wisconsin about 2.5 years ago, unrelated to cannabis. Before I moved here and as I was living in Colorado, I've always been a consumer of cannabis. I found that having the accessibility, I was able to kind of supplement it in rather than some of the pharmaceuticals and other things that are, typically prescribed to a young college kid, specifically for ADD and anxiety. So what I found is cannabis kind of helped me fill that gap. And that's kind of how I gained an interest into it. Fast forward to when I came to La Crosse, noticed a huge deficit in the industry out here and a really need for, high quality cannabis products. And I had the knowledge and I had the team behind it. So we went ahead and jumped into Carbon.
My name is Max Weber. I was originally born here in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Stayed here up until I was about 19. I moved out to Colorado in 2008. I was kind of in the restaurant industry out there for a while, lived there for about 10 years total. And while I was there, I think it was 2014 when legal marijuana cannabis went recreational there. And so I kind of got to see how that had an impact on not only the economy, but just people's well-being in general, people that really needed to use the plant as a medicinal value to it. Seeing that happen firsthand kind of just made me really want to get involved in it. And then I ended up, fast forward, moving back to Wisconsin, 2018. That's right when the Farm Bill had passed and legalized hemp in Wisconsin and the rest of the country. Austin is actually my brother-in-law too. I married his sister, Stephanie, which is how he ended up in La Crosse in the first place. And so we kind of just picked each other's brains for a few months, and we both were consumers and wanted to get in the industry, and that was our ticket in. So yeah, that's kind of why we wanted to get into this.
Comparative to other states, you just found an avenue with Carbon Cannabis to start it with the legislation being passed. What was that initial concept?
To start, originally we looked into the textile side of things, growing hemp for fiber. With the Farm Bill and hemp becoming available as a traditional commerce, we thought that would be a good entry point. What we found is that the infrastructure wasn't there. It wasn't as developed as the CBD industry. So then kind of flips to the backside of that. One of our other business partners, Matt Boschka of Cannabis Depot, he was kind of having a hard time sourcing local, high quality cannabis products. And so the concept kind of came once we all kind of sat down and had a conversation of, how do we fill this gap up the supply chain? He had farmers approaching him. He obviously has a ton of vendors for finished goods, but nothing local and nothing that he could actually put his hands on and see, where this comes from. Max and I kind of bring that expertise to where we're familiar with the industry. We understand the processing behind it. And so really it made a lot of sense for us to come together and really vertically integrate essentially from retail all the way up the chain to manufacturing.
For someone new or interested in CBD, can you explain the difference between CBD, hemp, and marijuana?
Absolutely. The short answer is that those are all the same thing, kind of the way, and by definition, hemp is cannabis with less than 0.3% THC, which is a psychoactive chemical that makes you feel high. Marijuana, by definition, is anything above 0.3%. CBD is a cannabinoid, a very common cannabinoid, and that's kind of where the name is derived from. Typically, you see CBD derived from hemp, although it can be derived from marijuana as well.
You reference on your website you're a small batch Wisconsin CBD producer. You must work with a lot of local farmers. You already mentioned that. Why is that important to you?
Control. That's kind of the biggest point to touch on there. When it comes to a formulation aspect, the cannabis plant has a lot of different variations. And so for us, we wanted to be able to hone in on an input material that would produce the final formula that's as effective and high quality as we can. When we first started Carbon, we were working with many different farms, trying to kind of vet and source and see what was the best fit for our formulations. Fast forward to today, and we only work with 3 farmers across the entire state, all of which grow organically, all of which kind of share the same vision and values of very high quality cannabis. I like to call these gardeners, not farmers. This is not traditional agriculture. This is a very intensive, high care industry. So we kind of have aligned ourselves with the farmers that really fit that vision and have a history and a large knowledge of this specific plant.
So what's the difference between growing cannabis in Wisconsin than any other region? Is there anything different about it or special about the region? I know we have a lot of per capita in this area, organic farms.
What we've noticed, and this is something that we didn't really start to discover until after the company was started, is Wisconsin soil is absolutely awesome for cannabis. Max can attest to this, but we go out to some of our farms and these plants are 8 foot tall, extremely healthy. They look great. Regionally speaking, when you talk about cannabis, unfortunately, a lot of it has to be grown indoors. So that's where Wisconsin has provided an opportunity with the soil and the land that we have out here. The outdoor climate provides a great growing space for cannabis. So I think that's why we're seeing a lot of success with the hemp program out here.
You kind of touched on it a little bit, but how do your practices and products stand apart from other businesses?
So one thing that we do, kind of where we got our name of our company from, Carbon Cannabis, is we use a CO2 extraction. Comparatively, I don't want to say most, but a lot of other companies are doing an ethanol extraction. The reason why they do that is they tend to yield more. It's more cost effective for them to do that. It's cheaper. We decided to go CO2 because not only is it a higher quality of output material that you're getting when you put it into the extraction, it keeps in a lot of those plant materials that you want in there. Austin could probably touch on it better because he's more the science side. He runs our lab here.
Yeah, I mean, CO2 for us, it was the selectability of it. With CO2, we can dial it to where we can select specific plant compounds to use in that final formula. So terpenes are a big part of the cannabis plant that gives the desired effect, as well as the cannabinoids. We can actually hone in on the specific CBD compound and extract that very efficiently compared to ethanol extracting a lot of other plant material that has to be taken out in post-processing anyway. The back end of that is, like Max was touching on, the most common way to extract hemp or extract CBD from hemp is ethanol. And so the difference being there is that selectability isn't there. We have a much lower throughput, which kind of is why we're able to produce in those small batches and why we chose to use CO2.
And then to add on to what you had asked, Brent, how do our products stand apart from other businesses? Well, one is obviously we're local here. So like we keep everything Wisconsin focused. We work with Wisconsin farmers. All the hemp is sourced in state and actually within about 100-mile radius. Mm-hmm. One word that we really settled on when we were coming up with the company was transparency. And we wanted to give the consumer in an unregulated market the confidence and security that the products that they were buying were not only safe, but very potent and pure. Like I said, it's a very unregulated market right now. So there's a lot of stuff out there that you might not know where it comes from. You don't know if what they're saying is true as far as CBD content or the levels of THC. We do a third-party testing, and we don't only do that once. We do that 3 times throughout the process of our entire product development. So when we get in the raw hemp biomass, we take that, we send it out for a test, we get the results back. We try to make sure there's no pesticides, heavy metals, stuff like that. And then we take that, we extract it. Once it comes out of our extraction, we call it a crude oil before it's been refined down or anything. So we take that crude oil, we send that off for a test and just make sure we have all of our levels where we want them. And then finally, before we batch our stuff out into products, we test that out one more time to make sure that our final product is compliant with a less than 0.3% THC. We want to know what our CBD count is and what our other cannabinoid counts are. We post a QR code on all products. So we give the consumer the opportunity to go and check those test results to make sure they know exactly what they're getting throughout the entire process of that product.
So I kind of want to ask another question about cannabis. Other states are coming out in favor of reform, or it's been legalized for decades almost, it seems like. Where do you see Wisconsin in the national discussion of legalization?
I think Wisconsin is definitely on the right track, and I have to give credit to DATCAP, the Department of Agriculture and Trade Consumer Protection. By setting up the pilot program, they're essentially introducing cannabis to the state of Wisconsin. So credit given there. The bad side is that we're still far from any type of regulated and legitimate market, as you would see in the West Coast, Colorado, California, some of those more evolved markets. A lot of it comes down to politics. Wisconsin historically is a relatively divided state when it comes to the state legislation. So what you see part of the government is trying to get something pushed through. The other part is fighting back. And I think one of the things I like to touch on is it's from an education standpoint. Those who are pushing against cannabis, the only good backing that they have to push against it is that they don't understand it well enough. So that's kind of where we like to fill in and help educate people is, not only is there medicinal and health benefits to this, but the financial rewards that can be reaped from the government level it's huge. And so I think the reason Wisconsin is so far behind is because those benefits haven't really been calculated accordingly. They haven't really put a program in place to help develop that.
To kind of touch on what Austin's saying too, just as an example, when I was living in Colorado, and it was probably a year or two after recreational legalization passed, the tax dollars that were being received by the government there in Colorado, you actually got to see firsthand those go to work. In my local neighborhood that I was in, we had about, I want to say 5 or 6 different elementary schools. Denver's a pretty big area. I would say about 3 of those I noticed all in one summer, all got remodeled, big projects done there. The streets started to get repaired. It was just evident that this was actually going to use in the community. And when you see that firsthand, it really kind of changes your opinion. If you're on the edge, you don't know which way to look at it. And then not only that, I mean, the medical benefits that you're seeing when there's families moving their whole family to Colorado because of their access to it when their child has epilepsy. And that's one of the big things that you see medicinally used for cannabis. I mean, there's hundreds of uses for it, but when you actually see that stuff firsthand, it really makes you realize, like, what are we doing and why are we taking so long to get this to go through?
Everybody's been affected by COVID. How has your industry changed, or are you adapting, or has it just been paralysis? How have you adapted to this situation?
Every market is different. And when we're talking about the CBD and hemp space, it's slightly different than the recreational medicinal space, right? What you're seeing over all of them is growth. People being in their houses, there's a lot more stress, there's a lot more anxiety, there's a lot more need for medicinal cannabis, right? For us on a company level, our original plan was to be a wholesale focused company. So get our products into stores that can effectively communicate why our product is great. With COVID brings store closures, capacity numbers. So we've kind of had to make a pivot to online. And I think that's what you're seeing across a lot of, not only the cannabis industry, but industries in general, is online e-commerce is kind of the new wave of the future. That's where a lot of business is being conducted. But I would say overall, cannabis and CBD use is up since the beginning of COVID. It's just a matter of, how can we adjust from not only a local level, but a national level as well. And kind of the unfortunate part about that, like I mentioned, is we're a very Wisconsin-focused company. So for us to try to grow organically on just a Wisconsin basis without having these retailers and wholesalers open, it makes it difficult for us for sure.
So what's next for Carbon Cannabis? What do you guys see in your future here over the next year and a half?
A lot of huge things. I think there's not enough time in the podcast to talk about everything we want to. Mainly over the holiday season, we have a couple new holiday gift sets coming out. We're also going to be looking to implement some type of subscription program. We're going to be having some cool events, pop-ups. We're going to be at the La Crosse Farmers Market. And then obviously in the long term, we kind of just want to help evolve this industry as a whole, not only from the La Crosse market, but from the state market and the national market as well. Really pushing and connecting with the people and networking with those who are going to help push reform and allow us to continue operating not only as a CBD business, but to move into the medicinal and recreational space as well.
So if people want to find out more, what's the best venue to follow along?
All different social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, also at our website, carboncannabis.net, Carbon Cannabis on Instagram and Facebook as well. We are coming out with weekly blogs, so we're going to be touching on some of the key points that kind of help bring that education to the consumer. A lot of people know of CBD, but they don't know exactly what it is, how to take it. So we're going to be looking to touch on some of those things and kind of just help bring it more into the light.
La Crosse Local Podcast is a production of River Travel Media. Do you have an interview idea you would like to share with us? Message us on Facebook at La Crosse Locals. Subscribe to the La Crosse Local Podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you like us, rate us 5 stars. We thank you for it.